Good evening, everybody. A warm welcome to our viewers on this lovely Tuesday evening to our weekly panel discussion on Real Women NZ, where we talk about anything and everything to do with women's rights and also with what is going on in our schools, as our children are, of course, also affected by these current ideologies that are being pushed. So for tonight and for our next week's panel, we will be talking everything about education and the sexualization of our children in school. And we have a lovely guest speaker tonight, Juliana Wenning. Now, my name is Azian Zulkifli. Hello, Juliana. Hi, Helen. And I am a mother of three, and all my three daughters are at school age. I do homeschool my older two. And one of those reasons is definitely to keep them away from some of those gender ideologies that they otherwise may be exposed to in school. So with that, I would like to first pass over to Helen, and then I will introduce Juliana after that.
Welcome to the panel tonight for the audience. Thank you, Azian. Did you mention about Bronnie not being with us tonight?
Oh, sorry. Please,
that's all right.
You can tell.
That's okay. So yeah, Bronnie's not with us tonight, unfortunately, but she is managing family situation and she is away from home. So we may not have Bronnie back for about a month. So we wish Bronnie well and her family and look forward to her coming back on board shortly. So tonight is all about education. For the next 2 weeks, actually, we're focusing on education. Now, a lot of people that have been watching so far know that my involvement here is because of the Posey Parker. I was on the Rotunda in Auckland. However, what you may not be aware of is my involvement, why I'm involved in politics. So I'm now co-leading a political party, and that is all because of what I found in the education system. So I was teaching for just around 16 years as a primary school teacher. I'll outline a little bit about my background in that space before I tell you why I got out of education. I taught from year 2 through to intermediate ages, and in about the 16th year, actually probably about 15th year of my teaching, I stumbled across an announcement from the Ministry of Education. Actually, the crazy thing is that was on Facebook. So there was a post on my feed, on my Facebook feed, from the Ministry of Education, not from staff meetings at school, not from other teaching staff or my colleagues or from any school leaders, but from a Facebook post. Now, this post alarmed me straight away because it had up there around diversity and inclusive education, and I kept thinking, you know, this doesn't make sense, because for those who are watching out there and you're teachers, you know that for decades now we've been inclusive. So it's a little bit strange that the Ministry of Education would be pushing this inclusive stuff. So I looked into it, and sure enough, the more I looked, the more concerned I was, and basically straight away I knew I had to do something about it. So there's a few reasons why this was concerning to me. I mean, there was questionable content that was on this diversity education site. Now, I'll just explain a little bit. So they had a video called Trans 101. And now this teaching site is where all teachers go to use resources willy-nilly. So the teacher can go and get a suggested education lesson and use it in their classroom, regardless of age or anything like that. So I watched this Trans 101 video. It's actually on YouTube, so you can watch it yourself. And what it is a group of young adolescents who are at various stages of their gender, what they call a gender spectrum. But however they identified, they all called themselves trans, because apparently that's what trans is. Now this, like I said, it was on a teacher's website for any teacher to use to students. I found that highly questionable. I mean, if you think about it, if for the parents out there, you don't open your door and allow some stranger adolescent come in and teach your children about their sexuality. So yeah, highly alarming. Also, the intrusive content onto family values, I was opposed to, because I didn't go into be a teacher to teach about values, because whose values are we teaching? You know, we're supposed to be there teaching academics, definitely well-being, which we do need to do. However, the content now that is out there is highly sexualized, which I'll go into a little bit more further on in the panel. So what I did was I found a local MP, because you have to find an MP who's going to take a petition, because that's what I've made a decision to do, to take a petition to Parliament and oppose this gender ideology that was being forced actually on teachers to teach. At that point, that was about 4 years ago. So I did the petition urging the government to pull out this, gender ideology from the schools. At that time, we received over 40,000 signatures from other concerned parents and educators. Now, I'll tell you why this was shocking that the ministry put this on Facebook. So a lot of teachers 4 years ago did not know anything about this. They were not aware that this was a directive coming from the ministry. And I'll give you some evidence of this. So I had a principal phone me when he found out about the petition, and he said to me, "Are we supposed to be teaching this stuff?" This is a principal. And I said, "Have you not seen the new Sexuality in Relationships guidelines?" And he said to me that the Ministry of Education has not sent it out to his school. Okay, so there were very few 4 years ago that schools or teaching staff that knew about it. Okay, so the petition happened, and I ended up going up to Parliament in Wellington to speak to a select committee. There were 10 MPs sitting around there. I was not politically active at all, never ever desired to be politically active, but I knew I had to go and challenge this. So I walked into that room with 10 MPs sitting around, felt like I was walking into the lion's den, to be honest. But they listened. I had a question at the end from Kieran McNulty, saying that he did not believe there was an issue in New Zealand, and that some of the data I had used was from overseas. Now, that's a bit of a joke, because it's like, well, some of the policies that our government put together are not using data from overseas. But anyway, besides that, he wasn't concerned. He didn't think we had a problem. Now, when I left there, not long after, I watched a few other select committees, and Nikki Kay was the Education Minister at that time. So she was in a select committee with some 2 or 3 ladies from the Ministry of Education, and they talked about my campaign, but they also talked about the fact that they were concerned that many schools were not teaching from what the ministry were putting out, that they were doing their own thing with something completely different. And so the ministry wanted to take it out of the hands of teaching staff, out of the hands of your children's teacher, and bring in facilitators to teach this gender ideology. So there's a bit of background. I hope that that's not coming through from me on the microphone, but I can hear a background thing. So hopefully you hear this properly. As I said, the ministry were trying to push it even more to make sure that schools could not opt out of the can you put your microphones on mute for a minute, just to see if it's coming from my end? Thank you. Okay, and after that happened, we actually now have increased gender ideology in the schools because the ministry have been pushing it so far. So what has happened now, just to kind of like not go into all the details, but just a little bit, is I have gone further now to create a citizens initiated referendum, because when that petition basically failed, government didn't do anything. there were many people who said to me if they had realised there was a petition, they would have signed it. So I believe we would have had, you know, over 100,000 people, because not one person that I've spoken to believed that a teacher should be telling your child that they are born, or that some children are born in the wrong body, or that they can choose their sex. So for me, you know, there's many reasons why I knew I had to challenge it. At this time, I had gone down to part-time teaching. I was teaching in a school that actually had a child who started the year off, well, he was in the school the year before as a male, but then the new school year came round and he had started to transition to a female. So he started that year off as a female. So I have been in a school where this is happening, and I taught this student as well as interacted with the student. Now, what happened is when I put the petition out, there was one particular woke teacher, not from that school, but who obviously knew about the petition, and he got a handful of other people who signed a letter of complaint against me and they were going to send it to the Teachers' Council to have me deregistered. Anyway, long story short, that didn't end up happening. So what I realised, though, is to try and challenge this in the school system wasn't ideal. For one, the people I was working with, my colleagues and the school management, were brilliant people, and I didn't want the media or them to have any flack from me being in the system, in the school there, because I knew that it was highly contentious and the media were on top of it, because there had been some MPs who had spoken about it in the media, also attacking the MP, Joe Hayes, who took the petition to Parliament for me. So I knew that, I just didn't want to, you know, have to go through the school. So I stepped out of mainstream school, and as you can see, I'm not teaching right now. I eventually got involved in a political party who also have been standing up against this, and that I stood as a candidate at the last election, and crazy enough, I'm now co-leading the party. But we continue to challenge and fight this in the schools, and I'm really encouraged by a lot of other people now who are standing up against this. We've got groups out there, which you will hear about. There are even some schools who have made it clear that they're not going to teach the gender ideology. Even recently, I had a message sent to me about a school who was informing their parent community that puberty lessons were coming up, but they made a clear statement in there that they would not be teaching gender ideology. So, you know, 4 years on, we have got a lot of schools now who are more aware of it, and they have made that decision. They know that this is dangerous, it is harmful for children. I'll talk a little bit about the Citizens Initiated referendum before I then hand over. So when I put the proposal to Parliament to get the Citizens Initiated referendum, I had a lot of challenge through that. It was they had to send it off to other key stakeholders for them to read it. Now, they sent it not only to the Ministry of Education, but to the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Health, the PPTA, the Education Secretary, and of course the Teaching Council. Now, every one of those institutions opposed it, every one of them. So what happened then was I had to change the wording a little bit, only slightly. So then they put it back to those ministries, and they still weren't happy with it. And then we also had the human rights guy, I think it's Paul Hunt, he came in as well opposing it. So it's been opposed the whole way through. However, fortunately, just as an aside, I started a law degree a couple of years ago. So that really helped me to realise that they can't stop me from doing this. So, you know, every citizen is able to put something like this if you've got concerns. And the shame is a lot of general Kiwis don't realise how many, you know, what our rights are. And so we potentially don't fight as much as what we can and what we should. So yeah, eventually it got approved, and now we have the Citizens Initiative referendum out there. So for all those watching, I hope that you get a copy of that and help me to collect signatures for it, because we need about 350,000 signatures for it to then go to a referendum for the whole of New Zealand to vote to have this removed from our schools. So you have the opportunity here for us to remove this. You have the power. Parents, you do have the power. Now, there's a lot I could say, and we might go a little bit further with some of the stuff. I just want to mention that when I first started this journey, I saturated myself in everything about transgender, looked at a lot of these stories about detransitioners. So there's so many children that have been harmed, and further on down the track, when they realise the mistake that they have made, that others have allowed them to make, they have, you know, tried to transition back to their biological sex. But while I was saturating myself amongst all of this literature, I found the Inside Out organisation, which is a rainbow organisation that comes into New Zealand schools and are pushing this. And actually, I'm just going to read a very quick statement to you, something I found that I was horrified by, among other things. So they've got a lot of resources there for teachers. There's also something else that's a legal document for your children, and we'll talk about that later. So I'm just going to mention this statement. This is what it says for teachers. In their teacher resource, it says, be aware of religious parents or caregivers who are distressed about this topic. Clearly, they know there's going to be many concerned, right? It is worth noting to them that you are merely offering students a range of opinion, not an absolute truth. That's their statement, Inside Out, for teaching staff who, before they start teaching this gender ideology, to help them to manage the parents who are concerned. So if it's not an absolute truth, I ask you, why the heck are we teaching it? Any questions, Aziam?
Well, I think that is a great question, Helen, and I'm sure that we will continue to talk about this also, and hearing from Juliana how she has come across some of these things. So I'm going to give you a little bit of Juliana's background. So Juliana is an advocate in mental health, and she has supported and is supporting women and children that are going through the family court process. Juliana has also advocated at the request of Muslim women for a single-sex swimming time, and has petitioned to her local council. She was a candidate for the community board in Christchurch, and she is also a qualified special needs teacher and has done papers in educational psychology. So Juliana has a very, very broad knowledge and has been involved in many things surrounding women's rights and children's rights. She also holds a degree, an honorary degree in Masters of Arts, and a diploma in teaching and a certificate in counseling. She was nominated as the finalist for New Zealander of the Year in 2012 for the work Juliana has done with rape victims. So I would like to really thank her for everything that she has been doing so far for women in this country and everything that she is standing for. And it is a great honor, Juliana, to welcome you to our board tonight. So before, I would just quickly like to say that Juliana is not only our only guest tonight. We have also done a recording yesterday with a mother who has had a daughter who transitioned or was transitioned behind her back, and we will play this recording later. She couldn't be with us tonight, but there was a lot of very interesting information for the parents out there that may be watching tonight. So welcome, Juliana. How about you tell us a little bit of your experience in the teaching and how you have come across this whole transgender ideology.
Kia ora tātou and paumarie. Peace of the evening to everyone, and thank you so much, Helen, for initiating this, and Azian as well for your background work and help on all fronts. Unfortunately, I've been aware of this since the early 1990s. I taught in a particular college for 10 years, 1994 to 2004, and we had young adult male students who decided that they would prefer to live their lives as women for whatever reasons. Up to that point, we actually taught feminist studies at this college, and my role was to co-teach that with another woman. And one of these men decided he would change this to gender studies. So he went to the deputy principal and got it changed to gender studies, at which point some of the women who had sought refuge in our feminist studies classes really had to leave because he was part of that. And he was both a person who stalked women and who had absolute contempt for the women that he actually wanted to be himself. So that was probably my first encounter. The students whom I taught to were, in some cases, special needs, but not necessarily with less abilities in terms of their intellectual faculties, etc., but products of drug adult parents. Some were living with grandparents for safety, some were wards of the court, some had social workers who had to check in with them. And these students were vulnerable. There were incest and rape victims in my class. There were young women who had female genital mutilation because they'd been in camps in Somalia. There were Kurdish young women students. There were many Muslim students, and there were Coptic Christians. So needless to say, this was an interesting cross-section of society and of ages. And they were up against these adult male students who were pushing their own ideology, and we're talking 1990s here. In my classroom, we had support from police youth education and also from our health nurse. So we would not bring up topics for general discussion if the students didn't have a consensus that they wanted to address it. So applying educational psychology in the classroom, what we did was we affirmed in a positive sense, not in the sense that we agree with you, you're right, we will believe everything you say to our students, because that is incredibly unhealthy. We acknowledged their feelings and what they were going through and took their questions and tried to find not necessarily solutions, because part of this has to be a collaboration between yourself, the student, their parents and or family, and whoever happens to be also supporting them. So it was a complex situation, and I felt really privileged to be part of that for almost 10 years. I eventually resigned because many of these students were not given the support from the school body to actually complete studies other than through the NCEA. And I then went into advocacy and counselling and working with women and girls who were going through the court processes, including women who were in psychiatric institutions, not necessarily because they had deep-seated mental problems, but because they too had had abuse and had been victims of husbands who cross-dressed, who would describe themselves now probably as women and or trans women. And the whole process involved a lot of meeting with family court counsellors, helping prepare documents to go into court, in some instances with people whose languages was not English as the first language, standing up beside them in the court, literally standing up beside them. So it got to the point, and here we can sort of smile at this one, got to the point where judges would occasionally say, oh, Ms. Venning, you're back again, right, what is it this time? But it really was all an educative process, both for me and for both my clients, my students, who were going through their own idea of who they were as authentic human beings, who they were in terms of their sexuality, who they were in terms of could they respect themselves given they were women and they were victims, which is one of the platforms that gender ideologues use, and which I know from listening to detransitioners and friends around the world, that if you can't feel okay in your own body, you sometimes despise that body, or you think, I would like to be something other. So going back now to the 1990s, not just the last 3 or 4 years when the government's made its agenda absolutely clear and has contracted through the Ministry of Education officers and millions of dollars probably worth in funding, Inside Out, who are not a pedagogical organisation, but an ideological organisation to, shall we say, thick with minds, you know what I mean? And to actually encourage students and children to demand their rights from teachers, principals, boards of trustees, and to subvert the processes which good teachers, ethical teachers, and teachers who want to further their pupils' lives by actually showing them things that they can aspire to, showing them things that they can find that they are actually feeling good about, both in themselves and to look to the future, would want for children in their classes. Dialogue with parents is absolutely essential. And in New Zealand, as in the United Kingdom, the age of consent for children to consent to medical procedures, dental procedures, and blood transfusions is still 16. Now, one of the platforms that Denton's Lawyers has put forward as one of their main things to every organisation, Mermaids, GIRES, and other organisations who push gender ideology, is we must get this out of the hands of the parents, we must take this away from teachers, we must change the law so that persons under 16 can consent to this process. Given that the process is, apart from anything else, confusing children, and I belong to an organisation who has a speaker, I hope, coming next week to talk to you, we have come up with sex. It cannot change. Do not confuse children by teaching anything else. And I realised that I was going to blind you by holding that up, so I turned it around for you. Anyway, if you are a concerned parent, if you are a concerned teacher, I was going to say don't take this lying down, but I don't mean that in the punning sense. I mean that in the sense of if you don't speak out, who will? If you don't stand up, who will? It doesn't matter if you get pushback. It doesn't matter if you get harassment. Well, it does, but there are people out there who will support you through this process. I don't want to go into my own background except to say that I did get pushback. I do get harassment. I have had death threats. But I also have students who come up to me and remember me 20, 30 decades later, which is pretty amazing because I think I've changed a bit. But the fact that we could trust each other, we could discuss things, I could contact police youth education officers who at that stage of my teaching were really supportive of my students. Also our health nurse who, if the students were embarrassed or worried, we would put the questions to her one-on-one, and if the class was sufficiently at that point trusting one another, we would actually have a discussion around the issues that they brought up. I also brought in community law, or took my students to community law, because there were issues such as being filmed without their consent, being followed, being stalked, and as I have mentioned previously, I had students who were also incest and rape victims. So when I was teaching, I didn't accompany them to court, but when I became an advocate in the mental health system, I certainly did, and helped to prepare cases with other educational individuals and also with clinical psychologists and psychiatrists for court presentation. I know Helen has appeared before a select committee. I have also appeared before an education select committee about children's rights, parents' rights, and made a submission. And like you, I'd not made a personal submission in person in Parliament previous to that. So one does have to do one's homework, but I found myself explaining to the then deputy leader of the Greens about certain things in American education which she was not aware of. And we're talking in the days of Materia Ture here. I also found myself explaining to a National Party man who thought that choice should be up there for everyone about the age of consent in education in New Zealand.
Wow.
And, it just beggars belief that we have politicians who have not informed themselves on this, who do not respond to letters from teachers and educators and psychologists and psychiatrists and persons with experience of decades who are trying to talk to them, trying to write to them, trying to get a response, trying to have a dialogue. From the Ministry of Education, I got advice to go to the police if I was worried. From my local Citizens Council, which is in Christchurch, Otatahi, I got told if I was bothered about Drag Queen Story Hour, I should stay away. Oh. Under the Official Information Act, I applied to Sean Rainey, who is the City Council's privacy person, and asked 3 questions. One was, what are you going to do for International Women's Day to actually promote women and women's issues and what's happening for women around Christchurch? And was told there was no budget for that. And a private group was doing something, but he had no idea. Sorry, I'm possibly quoting him out of context here because I don't have the letter in front of me. But the second thing I asked was, and I deliberately put International Women's Day at the top, by the way. Second thing I asked was what money was being put towards Pride events, because I'd already noticed that there were Pride displays in the libraries and books there by trans men and women, British authors, which were totally age inappropriate. And, you know, what monies was going towards this, given they were going to have Drag Queen Story Hour? So I got a response to say, oh, yes, we're not spending anything on that as such. We're using petty cash and so on. And I thought, yeah, right. And the third question I asked was, what child safeguarding have you got in place when the Drag Queen Story Hour or Story Time or whatever you want to call it is going forward? And my apologies for not having my paperwork in front of me, but the response I got to that is actually quite mind-blowing if you think about it carefully. The response from Sean was, well, we'll open the doors and we'll let people in, and when the people that want to go to it are there, we will close the doors. So that was the Christchurch City Council's idea of child safeguarding. They were going to keep out the protesters. They were going to enclose the helpless children and their less than sensible parents, she says kindly, in this room with the Drag Queen Story Hour going forward with 2 men dressed as women and making children confused yet again by presenting for their education these men's rather perverted idea of what a woman is, a caricature of womanhood. So City Council, please pay attention. Listen, we are talking to you. We have been talking to you for quite some time. Politicians, pay attention. Parents won't be voting for you again. We don't know who the hell we are going to vote for, given the education sector is in big trouble right now. But please listen to your children, communicate with them, make it fun for them to ask you difficult questions. I was saying to Helen and to Asian previously, my students, to my surprise, would sometimes say things like, well, we turn up because we're never quite sure what you're going to do. And quite honestly, I would respond, well, I'm not absolutely certain either. You know, I'm teaching a curriculum, but. And the other thing is, and I shouldn't say this, but one lad came up to me one day and he said, I'm bringing my parents into parent-teacher evening. I said, what? That sounds weird. He said, yeah, it is. He said, but he said, I actually want them to meet you. I've never wanted them to meet a teacher before. And I was actually really quite pleased with that because it, you know, proved we had a connection. He could communicate with me. His parents could tell me what their problems were for him. And in some instances, we actually had to get our health nurse, previously mentioned, to actually medicate our students because they wouldn't take medication for their parents. So what I'm really saying here is please communicate, please build up trust. Please be really honest. When you don't know, say, I haven't got a clue. I'll find out if I can, or I'll point you in the direction that you need to go to find this out, or who else do you think you'd feel comfortable talking with? Because if we allow organisations with an ideology such as Inside Out to take over and to bully our good teachers and our good parents into being afraid to push back, then the people we're creating a disservice for, who we're putting before harm, or at least into imminent harm, are our students, and who are already possibly being bullied, possibly not having a good self-image, possibly not knowing to whom to turn. And basically, teachers are a resource, and they should be an ethical resource and stand up for each one of us. And as women, I think we have an obligation to stand up for one another, to have those difficult conversations. I've had a very difficult conversation with a friend of a friend in the States for the last 3 days, who didn't think that the figures from Sweden, which prove that suicides actually increase when young women especially transition, that they were relevant because she's an American and she's a lawyer and she knows what she's talking about, and she's concerned that students are being stopped from having medical procedures which might help them. So I have spent days and nights literally pointing out the studies that I have read, which have gone on in the case of the Swedish study and the one in the Netherlands for over 30 years, and have credible figures and statistics put together with a cohort of normal people and a cohort of persons who have transitioned. And the figures for suicide go up exponentially. And in private educational areas in Britain, where they have actually put together very credible surveys and gone out and talked to detransitioners who are willing to talk, 1/4 of them are happy as either lesbian or gay persons now, that they have actually tried to change back to their previous, in inverted commas, gender or sex, which of course is not possible once you are on that roller coaster of puberty blockers, which atrophy the body. It is now proved cause brain damage, and also cardiovascular problems in some cases, etc. So you can't go back to what you were. You have to make the best of who you are at the point you're at, when you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, if I'd thought about this, I wouldn't have done this. If I had got the right information, I wouldn't have done this. And the Cass report, which you're probably familiar with, which stopped the GIDS, the Gender Transition Group at Tavistock after 30 years, and has now gone to small clinics throughout Britain. What actually stopped that in the end was they had not kept a trail of their patients and their well-being. And the judges could not believe that there was no actual follow-up. And the clinicians who are interviewed in Hannah Barnes' book, Time to Think, actually said, we tried to take this to the safeguarding person. We tried to tell parents there were problems. We tried to explain. And the Kira Bell case, which you may or may not have heard of, she said, if I'd known at coming up to age 16 what I know now at age 22, I would never have gone down this path. I was not told of the risks. So getting back to education, if we don't tell people of the risks, if we don't tell them the truth, if we sort of sell them a bill of goods that might look good, but isn't actually reality, then we are actually at fault ourselves, and we have to really think about where we're going, what we're doing, and what's next.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's so many questions that we could touch on from what you've just said. I just want to touch on a couple of things, Juliana. You mentioned bullying. Now, what I've seen with this push from the rainbow crowd and a lot of this content is actually those who disagree are the ones that are going to be under the bullying. So, for example, if children now don't agree with their other children identifying, they're the ones that the finger gets pointed at. You're not being kind and all of this stuff. So we used to talk to children about being critical thinkers, but now the guidelines, all they have is affirm, affirm, affirm. And we have children now who probably are afraid to say no or to go in opposition, so they want to be a part of the group. As you know, children have got peer groups and they need to fit in and belong, so they would probably just go along with it to make sure that they're not going to become a victim of bullying. So real issues here, and I'll just link that to Pride Week. So we used to have a Pride Day at school, but are you aware now it's a whole week of Pride activities and resources at school? So I don't think I've shared this yet, and I'll just quickly share it with you. Last year during Pride Week, I had a parent send me a little video of her 13-year-old who just started high school. They were in Pride Week and they were asked to wear mufti, have a mufti day, and to come dressed with colours. Now the daughter didn't tell her parents about this, but she just got up and put on all dark clothing. Okay, so her mother just thought, okay, it's mufti day, she's going off to have mufti. Now that girl went to school and teachers questioned her why she wasn't in colours. And she turned around and she said to them, I care about these people, but I don't agree with them. So I'm just doing normal mufti. Now, the teacher said to her that she should have, all children were supposed to wear colours to support the pride. Now, it gets worse. So so the assembly was about to happen, and this girl probably was aware that there was some stuff going to happen that she wouldn't have agreed with. So she asked the teachers if she could sit out. Think about this when parents are saying, oh, well, opt our children out of sex ed or whatever. So this girl, 13 years old, brave girl, you know, no parents there. She tried to do the right thing by her values and what she believes. And she was told, no, you cannot sit out. You need to be involved. Now, she sat in there and took a sneaky little video, which good on her. So I have that video. The parents sent it to me, and it looked more, instead of a school assembly, it looked like a drag show. What happened was 2 boys came out on stage dressed in their glitter dresses. So it was like a coming out parade. This is in Christchurch.
Oh, yeah, I can believe it.
Yep. And so the teaching staff, you know, around the room were all applauding and celebrating these boys who were now coming out as females. This is at a high school, right? And you know, yeah, there's so much wrong with that. But Pride Week, I had a student email me, a boy at a boys' school, who said he's fed up with having pride rammed down their throats throughout the school week. You know, the pride flag flying and all the lessons and it's really disturbing when our students, our young people are out there having to stand up to this. It is up to the adults to be adults and actually start protecting our children. I get so cross and I don't care what it looks like, because this is so harmful to our children. We have got the highest ever of mental health and anxiety in our young people. It is no surprise that we have half of our children not actually wanting to go to school. Is it any surprise? So, yeah, my question.
I think, Helen, sorry, but I think it is now Pride Month. I think it has been extended and it's now a whole month.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, wondering also what are they gonna learn in school? How this is so pushed on all of these children. It's actually scary. I think it is scary because, like you say, the peer pressure, and then if the teachers are pushing onto those children, even the brave ones that don't really want to participate, where does it leave them? And we as adults can already see the pushback that we are getting, right? We've all seen that. For standing up for what we believe in, how much harder must that be for a young person in school to push back against us? Sorry, Helen, please continue. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Helen.
Okay, sorry about that. I've just got some comments that I'm throwing up on the screen. Somebody said, brave girl. We've got during Pride Week, there is a day of silence by trans activists. Oh, my gosh. Okay, what school was this?
It'd be good to have them being silent, wouldn't it, though? Let's face it, you know, one day of silence by trans activists. Thank goodness for that. Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry.
And then there's, where are we? Cancel Pride Week when you come to power. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Affirm biological sex. Again, absolutely. Poor kids are damaged. Yep, somebody else said that. Okay, so the school, I am going to say the school because we actually talked about it in the media. So that was at Māori Hau High School, forcing that mufti day, you know, or pulling up that child as well about it. Vomit inducing, yeah, absolutely. Pride Week is brainwashing. Yep. Andrew Shelley, where are you? You've got something there. It's getting harder and harder to have a day that isn't LGBTQABLMN++. Yeah, alphabet soup. So the teachers shouldn't be pushing this. We've got, thank you, agree. Where are we? Lots of comments. Thank you for the comments, audience. I will try and put some more up shortly. But what we have got now is I'm going to play a wee clip. So our other guest, Juliana, we will ask you some more questions. If you don't mind, we'll have a look at this video.
Go for it.
Yeah. So last night, ASEAN and myself, we had to do a pre-recording with Debbie, who was going to be on our panel tonight, but it's her birthday today. So she's having a birthday dinner with her family, of course. So she graciously allowed us to do a video, and we're going to play that now. At the end of that, you can throw up any questions, but we'll also ask Juliana her thoughts about the content. I don't know if we mentioned, tonight we'll be running longer than the 1 hour. So if you're worried about time, we're here for a wee while tonight. So I hope you can stick around. It's so good to see a large audience out there. And thanks for your participation in the comments and questions. We'll get to those. So here we go. Coming on now. Afterwards, if you have any questions, throw them. Recording. Debbie, you couldn't make it to the panel tonight, so we are recording. Happy birthday, bye. It's much more special for you to get out with your family for your birthday, but appreciate you doing this recording with us so that the viewers can watch this throughout the panel. Just letting the viewers know as well that Debbie is available for questions afterwards. If you have questions, throw them up and Debbie will be following the page at some point. So who lives in board of the school helped her transition a female to a male. So you're out there thinking that it's crazy, none of this stuff happens in New Zealand. It happens, and we have here Debbie to tell us about her account. So we have some questions for you, Debbie. Thank you. The first question I would like to ask you is, can you tell us what year your daughter was at? I'm going to say the name of the school because it's no secret. This is happening in schools, so it's important that parents know. Can you tell us what year that your daughter went to Lincoln High School in Christchurch?
2017.
2017. Fantastic. And she was what age?
She was 17.
She was 17 years old. And I believe you told me she was there for about a year?
Yeah, just over a year.
Over a year.
Okay. Yeah, a year, I think, and year and a half.
Okay. Now, the first you knew of anything happening with your daughter wanting to dress and it was from a phone call from the counsellor. Can you tell us a little about that from the school counsellor?
I got a phone call out of the blue from the school counsellor. The school counsellor was very apologetic on the phone. Did want her to so much that my daughter was suicidal, and I had a GP. Time we'd only been in Christchurch for about 6 weeks, and I didn't have. So person really didn't know if that I had the character, and when we got to the GP, the appointment, because I wasn't invited in to hear what was going on. After the appointment, I put my head in the door and I said, look, this is kind of weird. Is it true? Is she really suicidal? And the GP just reassured me and told me that she was absolutely not suicidal, that she was totally fine, that I had absolutely nothing to worry about.
Wow.
And I didn't know what had just happened.
Yeah. And so just for our viewers, Debbie, can you tell us just a little bit, how was your relationship with your daughter before all that started?
We were very close. We had lots of fun together. Very loving, very close bond. And you know, we could chat about all sorts of things. So yeah, that's a relationship I miss very, very much to this day.
So after you received that phone call and you took your daughter to the GP, was there any more contact from the school? Did you talk to her teacher or anything like that?
No, nothing.
Are you saying that there was no contact from, you never spoke to any other teacher at the school, the principal, only that counsellor?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. That's interesting. No contact. So that the school, for such a big issue, a big concern, the principal did not call you into the office to want to actually discuss the family dynamics and the concerns about a child who's going through a really personal, emotional time, as well as
no,
your family.
They didn't call me in at all.
I'm really astounded by that lack of care and duty from the school. So really sorry about that, Debbie.
Yeah. So what else happened in school, and was there anything else that was going on that led to your daughter, learn about this? Did you know about any courses around sex education, for example? Was there anything like that?
I didn't know anything. There wasn't anything on the school website about any kind of rainbow club. I found out these things after the fact, long after. And the only other thing that I noticed was her grades were getting very bad. She went from a sort of B grade student when we lived in the North Island to just failing at every exam except for photography, which she was good at. And I knew that something was strange, in her behaviour. She didn't want to come out of her room. She was on the computer a lot. I assumed that she was doing homework, but I don't, she was failing, so I guess she wasn't. I did question her, and she did say that she thought that she might be trans, and I didn't know what that meant really. I thought it just meant, having a short hair and wearing baggy clothes, and I didn't care. And so this went undetected on my radar for quite a while.
Debbie, you mentioned to me once before, because for the audience out there, Debbie and I have had an interview previously to this around the backstory as well, which we might be able to cover another time, but we're acknowledging that tonight and next week is all about education. So we're really focusing on education now. However, I would like you to come back another time, Debbie, and talk about those other factors. But you're saying that you weren't aware of any sexuality lessons, but you did mention to me once that there was literature in the library with a sexually explicit trans book. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because
after my daughter left, I noticed that there was a school library book that was in her room. Obviously, she hadn't returned it or something, and it was I Am J, I think that's what it was called, and it was about a girl who thought she was a boy who was attracted to girls, and there was some pretty graphic scenes in that book. And I was fairly shocked that was the kind of literature that she had to write a book report on, and I did read her book report, and it didn't seem like she was I don't know, it didn't seem like she really believed that a girl could become a boy in the literature, but I think this is such a belief system that kind of they marinate in, and they believe it the more often that they tell themselves it. So yeah, it's literature that just does not belong in the hands of minors and at schools.
Absolutely. We talked also around the fact before that, you know, your daughter was at an age where teenagers don't so much want to hang out with their parents. It's more around the peer group now. So
yeah,
they want to fit into that peer group. And if you have a school out there who is fully embracing the rainbow indoctrination, I'll call it, and the propaganda, because it should never be part of our school in the classrooms or in the playgrounds, it's politicized. So if you've got that happening in the school, and then the group of students around are all discussing that, and, you know, they're clearly, some of them rebelling against parents, do you think that had a part to play in any
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Her peers also identified under that rainbow umbrella, and you know, that they're individuating as well. Yeah, it was definitely something that it's a normal thing just to do, to individuate from their parents, but this is toxic path of individuation. So yeah, parents need to be aware.
I guess that's one part is why they're calling it a social contagion, right? Because
yes, correct.
It is the peer pressure. It's what they learn in school, and then it's what they see online. And so what I have seen happening to other children that got kind of, you know, manipulated and sucked into this trans ideology is that once they were online, that they get a lot of attention, that there's a lot of positive comments like, yes, do that, and yes, you know. Did you find out, was your daughter you know, involved in online groups like that as well?
I have no idea. I would like to know, but actually I don't know. Yeah, something that I kind of feel a bit helpless as a parent about, with you know, exactly what your kids see online. I mean, you can put guardrails in place for, you know, keywords, if that, you know, like some sort of watchdog software. But if those keywords don't come up, you know, what do you know? You don't know.
And
so,
well, I don't
the
think
kids are
the problem,
smart,
though.
right? No, they're smart. They will find the information if they really want to look for it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's not about what you do at home. It's actually the school is embracing it, and they are teaching it. And like, we're talking about 6 years ago, when your daughter was at Lincoln High, 6 years ago. And, you know, 6 years ago, most people didn't even know this was happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot more conversation around it now. The Ministry of Education pushed even more, and I'll be talking about them live, so you'll be able to catch up with that another time. But do you believe that because of the school affirming that she has gone down, that she may never have gone this far? Because, you know, I don't know if the audience, I don't know if you've told the audience yet, but your daughter is now on hormones, sex change hormones, and is doing the full transition. Is that correct? Is it partly the schools that you think is why she has gone that path?
I have no doubt that if I hadn't sent her to Lincoln High, she would still be identifying as female. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is very, very sad, and yeah, you know, looking to hear that. And what would you just say? You know, I've seen so many comments that say this is only happening overseas. This is only happening in America. That's not happening in New Zealand. What would you tell those people?
Yeah, they're in denial. It's happening in every Western nation. It's if you look at the young leaders of the World Economic Forum, which Jacinda Ardern was, a star pupil of, also Justin Trudeau, anywhere that there is woke ideology going on, because it only woke is only works in English. Any other language it doesn't work so well. So this is rife in Canada. It's rife in Australia. It's thankfully the UK is starting to wake up. They're taking the lead from the Nordic countries. Which the studies that are coming out of Sweden, they absolutely have told us without a shadow of a doubt that this doesn't work, that this makes our kids suicidal, and there's actually no evidence that if you don't affirm that kids are going to suicide. There's no evidence for that at all. If there's any evidence, it's because of comorbidities like schizophrenia that are already, at a high risk for suicide. So it's very disingenuous for the medical establishment to be emotionally blackmailing parents like this. Yeah,
Debbie,
for sure.
Can I ask you, Debbie, what would you do anything differently?
Would I do anything differently? If I'd known, then I would never have sent her to Lincoln High. I would have found a school that actually is in line with my views, and would know exactly what she was going to be, in her education, which she was getting so well at the girls' high school that she was attending, and I just assumed that public schools would be the same, but they're not, because I didn't know about this in 2017.
And what message would you give any other parents that maybe, recognize that some of these things are happening to their own children now? What would you tell them? What should they do? What is the best course of action?
That is such a hard question, because as I said before, this is a natural time where our teenagers are individuating. Every time, in teenage years, they seem to have cotton wool in their ears and eyes that says that everything mum and dad says is stupid. And then, as soon as individuation is over, then, mum and dad are welcome back. But it's such a tough time. But this is so insidious. This is cult programming that needs to be cut out like a cancer. It really does. If you can get your kids out of the school, if there's any way at all that you can move, then do it. Otherwise, if you really have to stay where you are, you have to fight. You have to go and confront the school, and do things like find those books from the library, read them, and highlight it at the parent-teacher committee meetings, and say this is unacceptable. This is pornography. This is you cannot be grooming minor children to be doing things that are going to destroy their character and destroy their sense of emotional and spiritual well-being as they're growing up. It's it's just unacceptable. I mean, you can go and look at some of the examples from America where parents are fighting back. Obviously, they've got a higher population than us. And even in the UK, where parents are fighting back, and Canada, where parents are fighting back. I think the reason that we don't see a lot in this country is because we just don't have the same population of parents with guts to stand up to these public service. You know, our teachers, they are there to serve us. We pay their wage.
I agree. I think that some of the issue in the past has been it's been come under the guise of inclusivity and diversity, and you know, there's a lot of teachers who weren't aware of the extreme radical you know,
those are woke words. Those are woke words because they have two meanings. I mean, a normal person will go inclusivity. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yes, of course I want inclusivity. Oh, diversity, that sounds wonderful. We all want equality. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. It doesn't mean what you think it means. It means something that they say it means, because they don't want it to mean what you think it means. They just want you to give them power. And they are bullies. They are absolutely bullies. And if you want to stop this, if you don't have any other way to move out to the country where there's no internet for your kids and let them hate you, if you don't have that, you know, if you can't do that, then you have to speak. This is a war, and it's not a war of, I mean, it's not a war of like we normally know war. This is a war for our kids' mind.
Psychological.
Yes.
Look.
Yeah. I think Jacinda Ardern got on and said, "Oh, you know, this is war, and the weapons of warfare are speech." It's because she doesn't want us to speak. She doesn't want us to think critically. She wants us to just submit to the bullying. And if we let them, they
we're the parents, right? And actually, we more authority and my it's been a bit of a hidden curriculum, this whole gender stuff for a few years now that we've brought it out.
They're asking kids to keep secrets. Never, ever, ever a good idea.
No, and we've talked a lot about that in our panel. So there is legal advice, but not just for the parents. There's actually, and you hear about this in the panel, Debbie, and this will be for the parents as well, around what the rainbow groups are doing now. It's really important that they tune in to find out what is happening. It's very serious. And this leads me to, you mentioned that the school had your daughter going through ACC without your knowledge. So this is how insidious and how parents do not have any idea on the school leading the children to get this kind of support outside of you. So what were they doing with ACC?
I didn't sign any forms. As far as I know, I found out after the fact that had my daughter stayed in school, that ACC would have just ushered her through with the hormones and the double mastectomy, and that was something that rang true because it was mentioned when I went to the therapist the first time for me, last time for her. That's what the therapist had said that she was going to do, and you know, there was nothing I could have said to make it any different.
Okay, there's one more thing I'd like to ask you, and We will have you back on the show if you will be okay to come back on, Debbie.
Absolutely.
Just so we can talk a bit about that other backstory of why your daughter started, you know, having these feelings and the diagnosis of autism later on. Azian, is there anything else you want before I finish with this one particular question?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Debbie, for speaking out, you know, for coming on to the panel to tell the other parents and the people out there about what is happening in New Zealand schools. Sorry that you have to experience that. To this brave woman. I wish you all the best on your journey. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah.
Thank you for hearing me.
So yes, Nicole, sorry, Debbie, didn't know who I was talking to for a minute. Debbie, I'm thinking that there's one question I want to finish with, but just before I do, Azian mentioned, you know, support for you. I know there's a international support group for parents. Are you aware of that? With there's a lady who was speaking in on a New Zealand panel recently, Family First, called Erin. Did you see that recently? Otherwise, I'll send you the link. So she's got a personal story of her daughter as well, and she's set up this Saving Children from Trans Ideology, because, like she said, it's our duty. It's our duty
Yes.
as adults, and I agree with her. So it's a Parents International Support Group. If you'd like me to send you that,
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Super. And just to finish, what do you want teachers to know to help parents like you and your daughter?
What do I want teachers to know?
Yeah. What do you want the teachers to know who are watching this to help? What do you want teachers to know to help parents like you and your daughter going through these times?
It's really hard, because the depth of grief that this has caused me personally from my daughter and the rest of my family is just, there isn't any words to describe the anguish that we've gone through in losing her. There's just no words. If you're a teacher and you think that this is okay, you shouldn't be teaching. Honestly, you should not. It is criminal. It is absolutely criminal what you are doing. What you are doing to children who are vulnerable, who are mentally vulnerable. You're destroying their life. And oh my goodness, there is going to be enormous day of reckoning for you if you think this is okay. You've got no idea.
Thank you, Debbie. I will end the recording and we'll have a chat. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
What a powerful interview.
Yeah. So that was a very strong statement to the educators out there. And Debbie is so brave for coming on, talking about her story of what she has gone through with the school. She's also given some top advice to any parents out there. What I will just let you know before we continue is that next week we've got two special guests who also will give you more information to help you as parents out there. But Juliana, any thoughts or comments on what you've just heard, because that's your first time of hearing from Debbie?
I admire Debbie tremendously for still loving and supporting, although grieving, obviously, her daughter, and for speaking of her daughter as her daughter. because dead naming is one of the tools of gender ideology. They try to take away your sense of self and to remake you into their image. Now, the book that she mentioned, I Am J, it's actually a collection of books by the same author, Crisbeam, who herself left home at age 14 because of mental problems, either with herself or her mother, and who was completely disassociated from her family for the rest of her life, as a journalist, and volunteered at a school which had trans children, and has made her career out of writing books that actually subvert family relationships. So draw your own conclusions there with regard to Ms. Beam, but avoid her books. The other thing that struck me was the school obviously were not honest, and personally I would actually love to see a case taken against them in court for I was going to say subverting, but there's a stronger word which I won't use, but essentially they took a vulnerable young woman and allowed her to follow her delusions. They did not work with the parents to make her life happier or healthier. And that, to me, is a criminal offence. And under the Crimes Act, there are penalties there for actually, unfortunately, telling people under 16, telling people under 12, not telling people who are 17 about things that they shouldn't be privy to or have knowledge of. The other thing is, do avoid clinics like that run currently by a woman that I used to have enormous admiration for, and that's Dr. Sue Bagshaw, because of her 100 students in inverted commas, because presumably they are still school age, 65 of them are actually already on hormones. And the other thing that relates to this and what Debbie was saying is that not only will ACC do whatever they like that is recommended by a therapist who wants to go down that track, and I know some very honest and good clinical psychologists, she says quickly, but the New Zealand College of General Practitioners, and this was actually sent to me by a friend who is a medical practitioner, agreed on the 29th of April that they would start administering hormones for patients that came into their clinics. So not only are we having children pushed this way by therapists, schools, etc., we are having GPs who have no knowledge of these children or their families, and presumably, given what Debbie has experienced and ACC has done, no communication with the parents, but simply going to administer hormones. They're not endocrinologists. Most GPs certainly don't have a psychological or a clinical psychology background. They see you for 15 minutes and they prescribe and you're out the door. So that too is a very, very big red warning flag for parents to just think, what sort of communication do we need to have with our GPs if our children are seeing them privately? The only thing that I could advise there as a mum, a grandmother and so forth, is when a family member was having problems, I rang up and volunteered information that I thought the GP needed to actually help the family member, and said, I am not asking you to do anything. I am telling you what the situation is. Here is my perspective as a family member, and was thanked by the GP concerned, who hadn't realised what the other implications of the person seeing them actually were. And at that stage, it was a person with mental health issues who was being groomed. So yeah, communication is absolutely key. I'm not an expert at it, but I did role playing and all sorts of other things. And as I said, a sense of humour also is bloody good to get children speaking, to get youth involved, to make them think you are an idiot or a clown, but at least to get a reaction and then get a dialogue going. So I really admire Debbie, and I do hope that she and her daughter will reconcile. Thank you.
Yeah, great comments. Thank you. I note your comment around the taking a lawsuit. I know that there's a strong law case here, even around negligence and mental injury from what the school has been doing. So I put out a warning actually to any educators who are continuing down this path. There will come a time when there will be lawsuits, okay? And that will be happening very soon. It's already happening overseas. So if you want to, you can, change your path right now and push back. Just looking at some comments, well, Lincoln High has not altered to the past. Adhered to. Sorry, I can't see that. Yep, adhered to the pastoral care. Okay. Just going to throw up some comments here. Call them by their sex and Christian name, no substitutes. Right, where we got lots and lots of comments. And that's where the Vulnerable Children's Act should be available. Yes, I tell you what, if I get to Parliament, we're going to do a lot about the Children's Act. There's hardly anything in it. We've got Virginia. Problem is that the education system is being captured and individual teachers are being silenced and could lose their jobs. Well, yes, I'll just touch on that. So we talked about how I had the opposition from the Teaching Council. Now, the Teaching Council have got very subtle threats in the letter that they sent, not just to me personally, but also to basically to every teacher out there. I'll share that a bit more another time because I'm well aware that we're running out of time here tonight, let alone the other content in the sex education, the explicit stuff that I wanted to talk about. It's not only the gender stuff, trust me, there's some other pretty filthy content there that you would be horrified about. Right, so I'll just show a few more of these. Leave those kids alone. Absolutely. Look, since when did we give the school the complete power to parent our children? Highly inappropriate. So we've got some comments for Debbie here. I know that Debbie will tune in and have a look at these comments another time. Some of you have asked, Virginia asked what relationship is like now with your daughter, so I'll leave that for Debbie to comment when she comes back on, Virginia. Jordan has said, I can't believe I'm the only male here. Actually, you're not. There's another guy called Andrew Shelley. He's actually made heaps of comments. So thank you to the guys who are here. I know that throughout the weeks we've had other men as well, and a great audience. I can see, lots of people here, and I know that others will watch it at some point. Now, I know we said we'd do 2 weeks on education, but honestly, I'm thinking that we might even have to go into the 3rd week because there is a lot to talk about. Andrew Shelley, Marx used children to break up the family unit, which is a basic of any decent society. Jacinda, yeah. Okay, thanks, Andrew. With our kids, we had a family cell phone that everyone used and no one was allowed to raise anything, and that's what you should do. Yep, I've had big issues with technology, even in the schools, how often they're on technology. There's problems there that maybe in the next weeks we can talk about that, the social contagion of how these children actually fall into the trap of these activists who are online. What have we got there? They're perverse. Yep, okay. We won't use woke words. Parents fighting back. Not sure about New Zealand, but is UK and US, etc., some religious schools and even some churches. Now, I do know, I can tell you that it's not, some people here have mentioned Christian schools aren't doing it, but I guarantee you that there are some Christian schools that are finding it harder to get this out of the school. And the Inside Out have got a resource for Christian schools. Instead of me going through all of the resources that that Inside Out have got, I urge you to go on there and have a look. There is one there with on their website called Legal Rights, and it's telling children how they can push the principal and teachers to do everything that they say, everything that they want, including making sure that they've got rainbow groups during the school day. And there's some really alarming things in there around pronouns, around just so much. Is there anything I've missed tonight, Arzian, or is there anything you'd like to add just to finish off before we close up?
I think it's obviously such a vast topic and there's so many aspects to this, but what I took away from listening to Debbie and also from the conversation that we had tonight is that it is so important for parents to be involved, to stay involved, knowing what's going on in the school, make sure that they keep that dialogue going with their children. And that's no guarantee, like we've seen from Debbie, but I think it's a good start, especially stay vigilant around what is being taught in schools, go to school board meetings, and if stuff is being taught and presented there that you don't agree, make a fuss about it, right? Only when we speak out, and that's what this platform is about, only when we speak up and do something about it will things change.
Yeah, ASEAN, I've just put up that question or comment from Erin, and I'd like to address that because I've got a book here. I did say to you that I wanted to talk about more than just gender ideology. So when I started looking into this, I was given a book on sex education. Now, when I looked through this, I was pretty horrified, but one thing I did note is right at the beginning, it's got the year it was published in 2010. So here I was thinking that this stuff has only just been in schools for the last 5 years, but this is 2010, so 13 years ago. This is for year 10, so that is about 13-year-olds. Now, if you've got children watching right now, I'd advise you to very quickly tell them to leave the room because I'm going to show you something. Now, I have talked about this in some public groups where I've talked to a lot of parents and adults, and when I've told them about this, while your children are leaving the room, I'm just going to chat. So I've talked about this to a room full of adults, and they have been horrified the language I've used and what I've said. And I said to them, okay, so if you feel like that, how do you think your 13-year-old daughters and sons are going to feel when they have to discuss this kind of explicit content in the classroom? So I'm just going to show you, and then I'm going to read something to you. I'll just take that comment off so there's more room on the screen, and hopefully you can see a little bit of this. So this is the book, Year 10, Sexuality, and you can probably see some of that language there, but there's also just quickly, I'm just going to take another couple of minutes of your time. One more, and then I'm going to read something to you. Okay, now this is lessons that your children, your teenage children, are doing in the classroom. Horrified yet? You need to be. Is there anything you want to ask me about that, ASEAN? Because I've got something I want to read out as well.
Yeah, shocking. I find it really shocking. I'm so glad that my 2 older daughters are not actually in school and don't have to deal with that. I mean, I would even feel really embarrassed to having to talk or write about this and show this to anybody, let alone how, obviously children should be taught, the basics, academics, math, English, languages, all of these things, right? And sexuality education should be left to the parents. I mean, basic biology is all good, right? That's what we learned in school.
Yep.
But these things, it's just this hyper-sexualized content, and I find it absolutely disgusting that this is being pushed in school.
Okay, just to finish on, I'm going to read a scenario of a lesson. Okay, this is straight out of a book that teachers use to teach the classroom. This is a scenario cards for sexuality, identity, sexual orientation, and sexual behavior. For each of the following examples, decide what identity, orientation, and behavior the person shows. E.g., heterosexual, homosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual. Number 1, Max has never felt attracted to females. In fact, there have been a few guys he's been really into. He is engaged to Rachel and she is pregnant. He loves Rachel. She is his best friend, but she doesn't turn him on and they don't have sex very often at all. He has never had any sexual contact with a guy. Now, so much in here. Okay, what is it teaching? Dishonesty, hello, he's engaged to Rachel and she's pregnant, clearly with his child, but they don't have sex very often. I mean, there's just so much in there. We're talking to children about this. What are we doing? We are teaching experimentation. We're teaching, just shocking. Sexuality.
Promiscuity, all sorts, cheating, hiding things, and that's what I find really, really disgusting from the schools. This whole secrecy that they will change the name of the child behind the parents' back and feel no obligation to let the parents know. I just can't believe that this is legal, and I'm looking forward, Helen, to when you're in Parliament that you can do something about it.
Yeah, so I think thank you, and I will be. So you know who to vote for. Sorry, I won't get political, but there's some comments now, and yeah, they're pretty horrified. Like Linda, WTAF, agree, and that's right. This is happening, and it's 2010. This has been going on in our schools. You know, you think about your teenage daughters having to go through this kind of stuff. You think about your sons, and then they go off and experiment, and then later they have mental health issues because they have experimented with the help of their teacher who's encouraging this kind of behavior. You know, I mean, no wonder our girls don't respect their bodies enough to, well, you know, not all of them, but there's issues here around protecting our children's bodies, their mental health, their sexuality. It's horrendous. So, well aware that we're just hit 9 o'clock. Still got a great audience here, though, but we will talk more next week. Could you introduce who's coming next week, ASEAN? Or would you like me to? You're on mute.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, what was the question? It cut out for a moment.
I was just saying, do you want to introduce who's coming next week and then thank our beautiful guest tonight?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So it is a real huge honor to have Bob McCoskrie from Family First New Zealand on our panel next week. He's obviously been a spokesperson for everything that is going on in our education system. And I'm so looking forward to meeting him and to having this conversation, because he's got a wealth of knowledge and he's been in this and fighting this gender ideology that is being pushed for so long. And I've been a follower of his content for a long time. And so it's very, very exciting to have him come and speak next week. And our second guest is a lady named Margaret Curnow, and she is the founder of Resist Gender Education. So there are two amazing speakers coming up next week, and we are very, very excited and grateful for them to give their time. And that also, thank you, Juliana, for your time, for your expertise, and of course for everything that you are doing in the community, standing with those women, fighting for the kids, for their rights, and everything that you're doing. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, Juliana, I do thank you, and we would like to welcome you back at another time if you would be so kind to come on. We know that there's other wealth of knowledge that you have and experience that we could also be talking about further.
Well, if I can be helpful, I'm more than willing to do that, because I don't think you can sit back and just hope that it's going to change. You just have to continually keep going at it. So thank you so very much for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone else who's participating and actively actually getting involved. And kia tatou and paumarie.
Thank you. If you stay on, we'll have a chat at the end. Thank you to the audience. It's great to see so many of you tuned in every week. We will see you all again next week. There's questions up there that we'll go back to later, and Debbie will have a look as well, and maybe even Juliana could answer some of those things. So look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.